Yeah, Ashir.
Hello, guys. We welcome everyone of you to our first ever virtual online Spectrum. It's a pleasure for the RBS Club to host the first ever Spectrum. And for you guys who don't know what Spectrum is this way of discourse that was created originally by Jubilee, which is an online YouTube page, where speakers are given a question where they can either choose to agree or disagree. And the reason why it's called Spectrum is because the answers are in a broad spectrum of options, right? So you can either strongly agree, you can strongly disagree, or somewhat agree and somewhat disagree. So I hope everyone enjoys listening to everyone's valuable opinions on different agendas and issues that concern us all. So Sarsha will be moving on with the first question.
Yeah, so guys, the first question for our spectrum is Instagram announced that it was experimenting with eliminating the display of likes from its platform. This should be implemented. Speakers, you can start sending in your votes. First question for our spectrum is Instagram announced that it was experimenting with eliminating the display of likes from its platform. This should be implemented. Speakers, you can start sending in your votes. First question for our spectrum is Instagram is experimenting with eliminating the display of likes from its platform. This should be implemented. Speakers, you can start sending in your votes. First question for our spectrum is Instagram. Yeah, guys, so we have received 3 votes as of now. Anirudh voted somewhat agree for the question. Osmi Shrestha voted somewhat disagree. And Raj Yadav voted. Raj, you have voted twice. Is your
It
vote
strongly agree.
Okay, Raj voted strongly agree.
I think I voted somewhat agree, but it doesn't show up.
Okay, Larisha, we can take that in order. So Larisha voted somewhat agree. Udgam voted somewhat agree, and even Ashri voted somewhat agree. Now we are waiting for Meghna and Saint
Sasha, even I'm trying to vote, somewhat disagree. I don't know why it's not working.
Okay, then Saint also has voted somewhat disagree. And lastly, there was Meghna, and Meghna also has voted somewhat agree. So we can start with Osmi Shrestha.
See, the reason I didn't I somewhat disagreed to this matter was because a lot of brands and a lot of influencers have built a platform through Instagram, and a way to actually measure their engagement, when they're promoting their brands and when they're doing advertisements is through likes. So that's a critical feature, and the number of influencers over the years, they've grown a lot, right? And obviously, in terms of mental health, it probably promotes a more well, you don't compare yourself to other people, but I disagree on a more industrial scale, because we're promoting influencer growth, and if it aids their income, then I don't think it's something that we should hold back from or we should deter. That's all.
Thank you, Osmi. A clarification for the speakers. If you guys want to speak for this particular question, please write down me on the Google Meets chat. Okay, then Anirudh Tiwari, please go ahead.
Right.
So, in my understanding, what is a like option, right? In any social media, the like option basically says that what content you are seeing, you are in full agreement with it. But in the modern, pre-modern social media, what the like option actually makes you do is just simply acknowledge a post. For example, I saw a post, if I like it, that means I have seen it, I have acknowledged it. But the difference is that if Instagram or any social media as such, uh, promotes a dislike button as well to counter people's opinions. For example, if you see a product and if you don't agree with it, for example, it's not good enough, or if there's something which you want to see improved in it, so simply you go ahead and choose the dislike button. Because why do videos get why do I'll take a similar example. It's almost very similar to Instagram. In YouTube, videos get likes almost instantly, even before you observe the entire content, before you assimilate everything present in it. So right. So, I mean, instead of it mainly focuses on seeking validation. So, make it more productive, make it more, you know, uh, right, better for the viewers, and also by introducing a counter argument. For example, a thumbs down button. So, something like that would be pretty good in my opinion.
Thank you, Anirudh. Larisha, you can go ahead.
So I voted on somewhat agree. Just because I don't necessarily like the notion that like people like especially in Instagram the kind of content you put forward it like kind of dwells into this aesthetic kind of realm, right? So like a lot of people when you like on it or like the kind of validation you seek or like the kind of models you see are like you want to have likes on post and then you kind of make sure that you're acting like people who have a lot of likes on posts. So we'll see like people wanting to be Kylie Jenner or like other influencers who look a lot like Kylie Jenner because that's the beauty standard now. And I believe that like wanting to have followers might have like a bigger motive of making greater content, but I think having likes on posts kind of puts you in this place where like you want to have better pictures and then you kind of force your own beauty standards into society, and it's like there's like a tangible thing to it. More so like continuing over to Anirudh, I also think like if they had a dislike button, it would be a lot more better because nowadays influencers on Instagram, when they start to get critique, they just hire a PR team who just deletes comments and then unblocks them. But then, like, if you had a dislike button, you probably couldn't do that. Like right now, Kylie Jenner is like blocking everyone who's mentioning her not being migrant, like her workers in Bangladesh. She's like limiting her comments, but perhaps discourse could be better if there were more options than just the like button.
Thank you, Larisha. Raj, you can go ahead.
The reason why I strongly agree is because of how the likes have been seen in the modern generation, especially between the young generation. It is used as a sense of validation. So if you see someone else having higher likes than you feel some sort of inferiority. You feel, why is your content not good enough? Why is there better than yours? Are you less prettier? Are you less good looking than them? So what removing the like does is it removes the sense of comparison. And uh, talking about Osmi's point about the brands brands helping the social media and paying them the for the promotion of their brands. What is there are other metrics to know how much the audience is reached by certain creators posts, like there are followers, or there are like graphs that Instagram itself provides for the creators. So instead of likes, you could use other metrics to attract brands to share your views. And when you combine both of these, it is generally better for the general public and even for the creators that the like button is removed from the platforms as a whole.
Thank you, Raj. So for this question, we see more speakers wanting to speak, but due to the time constant, we'll have Meghna as our last speaker.
Okay, so I voted for somewhat agree because, like Osmi said, in terms of business and industry, maybe the like holds a different meaning and an indication of engagement. But I think that mostly the like is sort of a negative thing, a negative aspect about social media, because it condenses this engagement and condenses feedback into like one like button, and a person can sort of interpret that as validation, or as it just condenses it into that one like. There's no other thing attached to it. So I think it's more negative because it just doesn't have the right kind of engagement, and it's more harmful. Again, I'm talking from the perspective of an individual more than a business. I think it's more harmful to the psyche that it's condensed into something that's numerical, and instead of words, and instead of something that requires more effort. So I somewhat agree that this can be implemented, because there are other ways of there are other ways to indicate that your posts and your stuff are getting engagement. So I feel like it's an option that, it's not bad to seek that this like, the concept of a like can be removed, because there are other better options to get feedback and to sort of be more, not just condense someone's post or someone's content into this one value.
Okay, so we'll be moving on with the next question. This is question number 2, and just before I start with question number 2, I want everyone to know that if you go on to RBS TED Instagram, we have polls as we release the question. The polls on our Instagram stories will be released, so from there you can vote as well. So for the previous question, question number 1, related to Instagram lives, likes, so far we have a 50-50 consensus. 50-50 voting, where 50 people have agreed and 50 people have disagreed. So similarly, you can vote for the second question by going on to our Instagram. So the second question is, abortion should be a universally recognized human right. So you can start voting now. So Anirudh says he strongly agrees.
Hold on, just my screen is having some issue.
So far, we have 4 people who strongly agree. The people who want to speak for the issue, you can type me in the Google Meet chat. We still haven't received all the votes. Okay, there we have all the votes. This time I will let Udgam start.
Okay, so what I want to highlight is that childbirth, like abortion, does not just mean, eliminating your child. There's many factors that are associated with childbirth, and it highly influences your quality of life too. So I just think that to have the choice to, to have the choice to what kind of quality of life you want to live, and since I believe that a person is capable of making judgments on whether they can sustain a child or not, and whether they can maintain a certain standard of quality of life. So I just think that abortion should be a universal human right, because people should have the choice to what kind of quality of life they want, and they should. I think they're capable of making judgments on whether they can sustain a life with a child or not.
Thank you, Udgam. Second, I think we will let Ashri speak.
Yeah, so what I think is that the choice that Udgam talked about is really important for people, right? Like you need to the ability to either ability to either see, there are different circumstances that people go through, like what kind of life they live in, whether they will be able to sustain life of another human being or not, right? So the fact that you have a choice to either provide this human being the life they would want or they would live happily, or or mm, uh, or knowing the fact that you not be able to provide or do as much as you want for that child, the ability to abort is extremely important. And really, like, it's not like the choice to abort a child is also a really um, uh, hard decision for people to make, I think. So I don't think that people would make this decision on a whim, be like, oh, I'll just abort if I don't want it. It's just like, it takes a mental toll. So even to think that, oh, people would just carelessly abort, I don't think it's that much of a huge reality for people. And I think the choice is actually necessary.
Thank you, Astri. So Saintchen wasn't able to speak for the last question, so I will let Saintchen have the floor.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, please, before you start, just say what your stance is before you start speaking.
My stance on this was I somewhat disagree with the idea that abortion should be a universal human right. But no, because I understand that there are many cases where abortion is necessary. But I think there is a difference between certain things that are permitted by law sometimes and human rights. Human rights that are unconditional, that have no questions, no questions or no requirements for you to do it. And so I think abortion in some cases should be allowed, but in many cases, if you make it a human right, such as having to, like, being able to drink water or not being abused, I think it really takes a lot of courage to possibly commit or conduct an abortion, because it is a universal human right. And I think although we do agree that many of us abortion should be legal, I think to make it international, it requires much more legislation and various cultures where we might be a bit more liberal, but they might not be. So I don't think it should be anyway close to being universal.
Thank you, Saintchen. So for this question, we're going to allow rebuttals. So if anyone has rebuttals to what Saintchen said or wants to add to whatever they said previously, they can go ahead. I will let Larisha speak.
Yeah, so I think one thing that people like we tend to forget is that you can like abort a baby without it being safe, and it has a really big health consequence. So that's why a lot of people back in the days when abortion was illegal used to use hangers, right? A lot of people died. People consumed potions, people consumed poisons to make sure that they they wouldn't be able to like have those kids. Even in Nepal, in like certain areas, people consume like this one tree because they believe that because of that they will probably like not have babies in the winter, right? So we believe that we like a lot of things, like because if you drink dirty water you might die. Just like that, in many cases, if you choose, because abortion is a lot about choice, right? Just because like there is a like facility doesn't mean every single person would want it, but just because there is a choice, I believe that we would save a lot of lives. We would also open up discourse, because I believe that people need to understand that it is their life. They are like their life before their child's life as well, and we shouldn't put this standard that you need to live and you need to have a child even though you can't sustain them, because that's a very weird stance to have, and it's very detrimental to society as a whole. Just like how we're countering post-maternal death, I believe that if we have abortion as a human right, it would be better off than not having it or just legalizing it.
Thank you, Larisha. So next we'll have Asmi speak, and then we'll end with Anirudh.
So a tiny rebuttal to what Senjin said. Basically, um, you have the right not to be murdered. That's a human right. But that doesn't mean anybody will stop speculating that there's so much that goes behind investigations that will, you know, bring a certain judgment to your case. The same can be applied to abortion, but that shouldn't stop it from being a human right, because again, like what Larisha said, it's a matter of choice. If you want to have a child, it changes a lot in terms of your lifestyle, and if you're willing to make that change in your lifestyle, that's a decision that needs to be left up to you, but that shouldn't stop speculation, I'd say. That's all.
Thank you, Asmi. So, Anirudh, you have the floor.
Right. So more than the choice aspect of this, let's go for the I would want to go for the scientific aspect of this, right? Let's say in a modern society such as yours and mine, maybe people have the choice. They will be able to decide whether they are fit for a delivery right now or whether they are not. But let's say you take some very remote areas into consideration where health benefit where these health aspect of the thing is not very good, right? So over there we can let these health professionals decide whether the mother is fit for a delivery or not, because in many several cases we have seen that after a delivery the mother, in many cases it results in a fatality, right? So these health professionals, they will somewhat be able to decide whether it's fit for this or not, because if a mother goes on delivering, let's say 3 to 4 babies, then not fit that's not fit for a family, right? And this aspect does not come into consideration when people are family planning in rural areas. So right, so in modern societies such as yours and mine, this could be a choice aspect. I mean, this could, people will be able to decide for themselves, but in many places maybe it's not a decision a mother can take herself, so maybe somebody can come into assistance. So that's why I think it is fit to be applied in almost all parts of the world.
Could I just add something, like in response to Anirudh? Just a short one.
Sure, yeah, but just make sure you keep it short.
Yeah. Okay. I think I agree with Anirudh that if abortion saves the mother's life, I think we should make it legal. But again, universal human rights means conditionless. And I think in many of the cases, it's only 1% of the population which is actually in danger after abortion. 99% of them are just people who got unfortunate or lazy or didn't wear contraception and they want to have the easier choice. But I think if you want to save lives of mothers, I think you should want to save lives of children as well. But that's just my opinion.
Thank you for that, Saint. With that, we can conclude this question. Now it's over to Saharsha for question number 3.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And just to give you guys an information in our Instagram page as well, just like our speakers had a clear majority for agreeing that abortion should be a
Just a second.
legalized human right. Even for our spectrum, there was a clear majority of 92:8 ratio of people wanting to legalize abortion. So our third question is, uh, there should be a movement to introduce and replace meat and dairy products with plant-based products that taste nearly identical. So I received 4 votes as of now, and all 4 of them, Osmi, Udgam, Anirudh, and Meghna, all 4 of them have chose the stance somewhat agree to this question. Larisha has chosen strongly agree. Speakers, and if you guys want to speak, please start texting on the Google Meet chat. So we have Ashri, who also voted for somewhat agree, and Raj, who has voted somewhat disagree. We have one speaker remaining, who is Saint Chen. Until then, I guess we can start. So Larisha, you can start.
So basically, what I believe is that like the consumption of meat in itself is very oppressive. To like, if you think about it, you're killing all those animals and you're killing them for literally no reason other than the fact that like maybe in Nepal you don't see it as much, but if we're looking at a global scale, we're looking at like people having meat every single day. There being a meat shortage because everybody thought in quarantine they're going to be having that much meat. They're having also the creation of these factories having almost no regulations. In especially we've seen because of like COVID, we've seen how they're packed inside in like plants in Denver, and like there's also a hegemony of the market from like these meat producers, especially in the USA. And I think that if we can identically switch it, we should, because first of all, I totally believe that there's way too many harms to the meat industry right now. There's like a lot of collective harms, there's a lot of individual harms. And even if you believe that animals should be killed, I think that because it does harm humans directly due to certain things like climate change, and due to certain things like how the industry is working right now. We believe that if you can change it, you should. And people might think that because like it's gonna be expensive, a lot of people can't afford it and stuff like that. But I think markets are created rather than intrinsically existing. I think that if there is a development in like this demand, it can be supplied pretty easily. Just like how Coca-Cola was supplied everywhere, you know. If there's a demand, it will be supplied. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Larisha. Before I move in, yeah, yeah. So before I move in for the next speaker, I would like to tell everybody that Sinjin has also voted for strong, somewhat disagree. So I would want Raj to go ahead.
So the reason why I chose somewhat disagree is, although eating vegan products is obviously better than eating meat products, but the prompt was specifically about starting a movement that prompts people to eat vegan rather than meat. So first thing we have to realize is the availability of the vegan meat products and the price. Most people can never afford eating vegan based meat products on a regular. That will cut off their diet on a huge scale. What creating a movement does is, it not only just allows people to join the movement, but it kind of pressurizes people to join the movement and stop eating meat as a whole. So the people who cannot afford eating vegan meat on regular, because it is astronomically way more expensive than normal meat, they will also have iron and protein deficit because they lack both meat products and the vegan based meat products. And what it does, it cuts the people having choice to eat what's best for their body or what they want to eat. And what the movement does, it just makes people join the movement just because it is a movement and not because of something else. So if vegan meat is not available, or if it's not affordable, or if it's bad for worse for their body than eating meat on a regular, and then it's definitely not worth it.
Okay, so Ashu is saying you wants to rebuttal. Ashu, you can go ahead.
Thank you very much. So to what Raj said, right? Right now, firstly, my stance on this, even though I'm not voting currently, is strongly agree. So the reason why I strongly agree is because firstly, we have, global international movements that want to save climate and whatnot. So it's not only a thing about ethical, being ethical. For many people, ethics is something that's completely subjective, and not killing animals may not be a part of your ethics, and that's completely okay. But there are many people in the world that we see today that really want to push the agenda of climate change and how we need to save the climate, right? And for that, they're buying metal straws and they're like, saving the turtles and whatnot. But the most important part about climate change right now is that we need to focus on what's really important. Firstly, what's really important is fossil fuel, which is irrelevant to this talk. But what is also very much detrimental to the climate is the animal agriculture industry, right? So just the amount of water that goes into irrigation for food and crops, and the amount of land and deforestation that goes into farming of animals, and just they consume way more than humans would. So you're giving all that food to animals, and then you're feeding those animals to humans. So it's just a reckless, a completely unrequired process, right? So you need to think about saving the environment, and this is a very good way of saving the environment. If you don't eat meat for if you eat meat and not shower for 6 months, you're saving. If you don't eat meat for one day and if you don't shower for 6 months, you're saving the same amount of water, because all that water will go into irrigation for crops and whatnot. And also, the food that goes into feeding these animals if you didn't have those animals, you could feed another 3 billion people in the world, and that's a lot of people. And also the fact, finally, I want to conclude with the fact about what Rad said. He said, it's the price would go astronomically high. But why will it go high? It's because right now we do not have enough people consuming such kind of food, and that's why it's not nearly as enough produced and supplied to the market. But if you have more people consuming just by the law of consumerism, there's going to be a lot more affordability into the price of these kind of foods. So I think in every way, in every sense of the way, if we did have this alternative, I don't see any reason as to why you wouldn't choose it. That's it.
Thank you, Ashir. Now, Udgam, you can go ahead.
I mean, I do somewhat agree to the fact that it's very important for climate change and to tackle climate change. But it's going to take a long time. As Raj said, the market needs to adjust to introducing vegan products, and the prices might be high. So I don't think a sudden movement is necessary. But I feel like if we can slowly ease into it, I think it'd be best. That's why I somewhat agree to the fact that a movement is needed.
Thank you, Udgam. Now we'll have Saintchin and then Meghna for the last speaker. Saintchin, please go ahead.
Thank you. So I also am somewhat in agreement with Raj, meaning I somewhat disagree with the idea because products or like plants replacements of meat, and that's completely fine. But I think to replace would mean to prohibit consumption or completely replace, and that is where I disagree, because I think at the end of the day we just need to be a bit more real. We're humans, they're animals, and I know it sounds somewhat crude, but then that is how it's been going on for a long time. And of course there are many talks about saving the environment and so on, but even I think there should be a bit given where, yeah, if all of us probably eat only one meal a day, we'll probably save a lot of food and lot less people will starve. But we don't necessarily do that. If all of us lived in small huts, we probably would save a lot more land, and 20 billion people could probably live in the earth, but we don't do that. I think sometimes we need to be a bit more like real on our aspects. Like we kill pigs, we kill dogs, like even like though much we might like dogs, we like put them in a cage, or they're our pets and they are our, like, property and so on. So although I do agree, I think to the idea that vegan products could be introduced, and if one individual or group of people want to have vegan products, that's very good for them and their idea. But for me personally, if I want to have pork, I will have pork.
Thank you, Saintchin. Anirudh, please go ahead with your rebuttal and please make sure that it's short.
Right. See, what Senchen and Raj are saying is that this is always going to be. I don't agree with the idea of forcefully making people replace meat. Right? Many people will not do that. I'm pretty sure, but people will be making a conscious choice when they are presented with a choice where, see, this will taste exactly like meat and this and that. Now let's look at the evolutionary side of this, right? Back when Senchen gave an idea saying that killing pigs, animals is fine, living in huts is also not practical now. See, that is true until a point where an overkill is there. Now humans have entered an overkill. We are slaughtering animals at an exhaustive rate, right? To a point where, I don't know, extinction is not possible right now, but it is very much possible for the upcoming year. So when we used to domesticate animals in the past, that was not exhaustion, that was not overkill. But now there are industries which are specifically, pointing towards killing this animals and this and that. Now, so that's all I want to say, is that there is a we see unless you are domesticating animals, killing them, eating them, that's also not fine, but that's okay, right? But if that is called coexistence, but if you start opening up factories and killing animals, that is called dominance. So there is a difference, and what nature has a rule that you're supposed to coexist and not dominate the thing, right? So yeah, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Anirudh. Meghna, you're the last speaker for this question. Meghna. Guys, I think Meghna is having some technical issues, so we'll be
Okay,
recognizing.
wrongly addressed. I think that eating meat is something that it's not. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now it's better. Meghna, please go
Yeah.
ahead.
Sorry.
Guys, I guess Meghna is having a technical issue, so we'll be skipping her for this question, and we'll request Meghna to write a written form of her justification so that we can share everybody what she wanted to say. So because of this glitch, we would recognize one more speaker, and Osmi, would you want to go ahead?
Much to say anymore right now.
Okay, if that's the case, then okay, then guys, I guess
Can you
we
hear me
are
now?
coming.
I'm sorry.
Meghna, speak something.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead. Now it's better.
Okay, so we talk. So the question talks about a movement, right, and about an introduction of products that can replace actual meat-based products. I think here we have to see that there's an ethical debate and there's a practical one, and many people would say that like nutritionally it's not practical to switch to products that would replace meat-based. But I think we have to like remember that a burger, the nutritional value of a burger that is consumed in America of beef, I know, and then the plant-based version of that. What is the like opportunity cost of switching to the plant-based burger? There's no nutritional difference because the two burgers are equally unhealthy to say, right? So this is why I somewhat agree because there are blurry lines in terms of culture like that, and there's for some people it's a huge part of their nutrition or health, but I somewhat agree that this movement needs to take place because like Larisha said, like we create markets, and if we put in effort into markets that you switch to plant-based products, that's going to take us somewhere, and that's going to start people who are healthy enough to convert to plant products. They can choose that path, and again lessen a lot of the damage that the meat, but the amount of resources that is destructive to our environment. So I think comparing that to the other food we eat isn't equal to should start replacing their harmful industries with more plant-based ones so that at least the option is there, vegan options are there. But again, it's not legally binding, and it's not forcing anybody to give in to that lifestyle.
Thank you, Meghna. So, seeing that we only have around 15 to 20 minutes left, we'll only be taking in a maximum of 3 speakers from the next question. So we have now progressed into question number 4. Question number 4 is: the Western feminist movement has done more harm than good for women in the East. And this question was created by Devat. So everyone can start voting, and the people who are watching with us right now, you can go ahead and vote on the Instagram poll. So far, we have 3 votes. Anirudh somewhat agrees, and Asmi and Ashri somewhat disagree. Larisha as well somewhat agrees. People interested in speaking for this issue, they can write me just about now in the chat. Okay, we have Raz who has voted twice. So Raz, can you please clarify your stance? Raz?
I strongly disagree. It's glitched out a bit.
Okay, sure. So we'll be taking the speakers now. First of all, we'll be recognizing Asmi, followed by Astrid.
Okay. Despite all the criticism we have towards radical feminists, extremists who have sort of caused a great imbalance in the scales of our judgment, I believe that the Western feminist movement has brought out so many issues that were once concerned personal, or what they concerned private, like domestic violence or sexual harassment at their workplaces. All of these were stigmatized and they weren't really emphasized upon. So by speaking out on subjects like these, the Western feminists have actually motivated women in the East to speak out about their own problems. So I don't think that they've essentially done more harm than good. I just don't think that it was as detrimental as society portrays them to be. I'm gonna leave it here so I can have the other speakers speak also.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe we can have Ashley go ahead.
Yeah, so adding on to that, noting has done more harm than good. I acknowledge that Western and Eastern, two societies, are completely different, right? The ideologies and the things that have been going on is completely different, and the things of Western feminism might not be like completely 100% applicable to the Eastern side, right? But when you think about doing harms, I don't think the Western feminism movement is inherently harmful for the Eastern, right? Like Asmi said, different topics have been brought up, right? Though it may not be the priority of the East right now, but it is something to be talked about, and it is something that is a need to be addressed. And yeah, and I somewhat disagree on that.
Thank you, Ashley. So if anyone has any rebuttal to that, you can go ahead. Otherwise, we will have Laisha. Sorry, Laisha will be speaking.
I guess I can go on. Yeah, so when I thought of Western feminism, I just thought of white feminism, or so I somewhat agreed that there is a harm, because I would have voted strongly agree, but I do guess that a lot of notions of feminism were brought out by these white feminists. However, what you need to understand is that nowadays when we talk about white feminists, there are people like perhaps J.K. Rowling who believe that, who are feminists, but they're also intrinsically transphobic, right? White people kind of at times do become insensitive to all of the umbrellas that the feminist movement tries to cater to, and especially also to the Eastern side, right? They don't necessarily get that there's a lot of different issues that are happening in the East that they probably do not know about. However, the problem here resides that white or just Western feminism has a lot more stance or a lot more area to have their voices heard, and I believe that it's taking away from the kind of issues that people here could talk about. I believe that even in Nepal, while we could have discussions about a lot of things, we sometimes, like, tend to go towards theories and like white feminism, and it kind of disrupts like our personal like problems, and it kind of doesn't allow us to go out. And even with allyship, I don't believe that like Western feminism can, like, especially white feminism, it doesn't exist as an ally to a lot of problems that we have, because they can't wrap their head around it most of the times. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Larisha. So, anyone with a conflicting opinion about that can go ahead and speak. Otherwise, we'll have to move on with the fifth question. Anyone who wants to speak now can say me in the chat. Otherwise, we'll have to move on. I guess no one wants to speak now. So we'll now go on to question number 5.
Yeah, so the question number 5 is, in light of recent happenings, I do not want to study in the United States of America. So Meghna has already sent in her vote and she strongly agrees to it.
Just 1 second. So I had asked our viewers if they wanted us to extend our time by a couple of minutes, because we still have 2 questions left, and we do not have enough time. So we have extended our session for about 5 to 10 minutes. So you guys can take your time when you speak.
Larisha has sent in her vote and she is somewhat disagreeing to it. Is somewhat agreeing to it. Apologies. We have received 3 more votes in, and Ashri, Osmi, and Anirudh, all 3 of them have also voted for somewhat agree. Sinchen, Udgam, yeah, we got Raj, Sinchen, and Udgam's vote as well. So Raj also strongly agrees to it, Udgam somewhat agrees to it, and Sinchen somewhat disagrees to it. So speakers who want to speak, please start typing in me in the Google Meet chat. Okay, we can start with Raj. Raj, please go ahead.
Yeah. So, in light of the whole coronavirus thing, it is pretty obvious that the economy will go in a recession, and they will give lesser aid to international students and also mostly prioritize their own citizens. So, and add that to the increasing prices of the colleges, it becomes kind of absurd to choose USA if you don't have a scholarship. And then with such a widespread of movements and riots and increasing crimes too, it makes a place way more dangerous than it already was initially. And I personally value my life way more than where I get my education from. So the way most universities also kicked out the students during the whole pandemic, which shows how less they care about the students and more about their fees, and add that to the loss of jobs and being an international student with nowhere to live, I just don't think I would prefer United States anymore as I did previously.
Thank you, Raj. Larisha, you can go ahead.
So adding on to Raj's statement, I do agree to all of those, but nowadays I also kind of, because I've been staying with my family for so long, I've had a lot of like nights where we just talk, and like nowadays I just feel like this whole notion that, I mean, I still want to study somewhere really nice, but I think that USA especially has this thing where I think we have a higher propensity to just stay there and never come back, in comparison to perhaps if we studied somewhere else, we probably would rethink about coming back, right? But I think, especially considering how expensive everything is and how I probably wouldn't come back, and like how it's hard to study there right now, I believe that if I could rather go to alternative places like maybe the Middle East, where like the education is the same, but it's just not in the USA. I would rather choose that over USA, which I would have not chosen a year ago, maybe. A year ago, I'd probably still want to go to the USA, but now, not so more anymore.
Thank you, Larisha. Udgam, you can go ahead.
Okay, I just want to say that I agree with what Raj and Larisha said. Since they're going to be prioritizing their own students first, there's going to be very less priority for us international students, and with less priority, there's going to be less opportunities. And since with such economic downturn during this pandemic, colleges are going to look to restore their funds as well, and so there's going to be less aid. And I feel like for the price that we tend to pay for American universities, we could get a much higher quality of education right here. I mean, the opportunities are attractive, right? But I feel like it's more justified to stay here and pay that price. In addition to that, with the recent riots breaking out, as Raj said, I just don't think as an immigrant, I would be safe and I would feel secure. So I'd rather prefer to stay here. But again, the opportunities are attractive, and I would always like to maybe revisit and change my mind.
Thank you, Udgam. And guys, just a reminder, when you are speaking and giving your stance and justification, please give out what your stance is. You guys are constantly forgetting to do so. Sinchin, please go ahead.
Thanks, Sarsha. So my stance on this was I somewhat disagree, because I do understand that in light of the pandemic, it might be a bit more difficult for us to study there. But I think the point Udgam brought up about funds is very important, but I think it's important for all universities worldwide. I don't think it will change the economy, or like the state of the universities will much change if you go to Abu Dhabi or you go to United States. But I do realize that United States universities have some of the highest endowments. That means there are some universities which already have billions. So I think US universities are least likely to be troubled by such pandemics. And I do agree that there are some riots, but it's because there are 3 or 4 cities around United States, which is a very large country. And yeah, although I probably would not feel safe right in those cities, I think I would actually feel safer if I went there than right in Nepal. If I got COVID over here, in comparison to if I got it over there, I think I would be much pleased that I was actually studying there. And I do realize that, yeah, all of us want to, return home or, be patriotic, and I do too. And yeah, some people, of course, prioritize their lives over studies, unlike me. I don't know, I'm joking, by the way. Of course, I prioritize my life over study, but I don't really see why, if I go there, it is so much worse for my well-being. I think I'll actually be safer there, and I'll come back to Nepal with a better education.
Thank you, Sinchin. Anirudh, you'll be the last speaker for our question number 5.
Yeah, I somewhat agree to this one, right? But most of my points were already given by fellow people here. But one last thing I would want to say is that any country, if you look at it as an outsider, then you see how maturely they are handling a situation, right? United States, of course, they did not do a good job at handling this pandemic very maturely. So basically, I want to say that in the future, maybe if I go to study there, any pandemic like this breaks out, I don't really know. My life will be in jeopardy, my health will be in jeopardy, right? And I might not get as much health benefits as Americans over there will. I don't know the specific rules and regulations. I have no clue, right? I never wanted to go there. But of course, over me, they will prioritize my fellow American friend, which will be a bit disheartening, right? So I would rather stay in my own country, and maybe if something goes wrong here, if something, I would rather die here instead of dying somewhere else. So yeah, that is all I want to say. And I would end by saying that Trump did not do a good job, and I'm highly disappointed by how they handled a pandemic like this one.
I don't see how that's
Um,
okay.
Thank you, Anirudh. As we know, we try to refrain from very political opinions here. That is why the questions are not so political. So,
Apologies for that.
many, huh? Yeah, that is it for this question. Now we will be moving on to the sixth and final question. Before that, I want to give you a result about Instagram polls. For studying or not studying in the United States, the poll has received a 50% disagree and 50% agree so far. So you can still go ahead and vote if you have not. Um, so now we'll be moving on to the sixth and final question. I want to thank all the viewers who are still listening to us for being so patient and being such good audiences. Even in the chat, I can see a lot of enthusiastic people, so thank you very much. The final question is, developing countries like Nepal should accept foreign projects / agreements like the MCC. So far, we have 3 people who have voted. Asmi somewhat agrees, Murad somewhat strongly agrees, and Larisha somewhat agrees. Still only 3 votes. We have a new voter. I can't figure out who that is. I guess it's Ashri. So Ashri somewhat agrees.
My vote is not registering. So I will just choose somewhat disagree, but I really don't have an opinion on this one.
Sure. The people who want to speak, you can say me in the chat. So Sinchen has asked what MCC is. So MCC is the full form is Millennium Challenge Corporation. So basically, this is an agreement that has been signed a long time ago by Nepal, where I believe the United States, they give a lot of funding in return. Well, practically they do not really say that there is any sort of return that they want, but there are speculations that the United States has done this to other countries in the Middle East in the past, where through agreements such as this, they eventually go on to assume full control. So the dispute really is about will this really hinder our sovereignty, and how will this affect our relationship with China or India, and aside from that, how credible is it, or how at the essence of it, is it going to be good or bad for our country as a whole? So Rads says he wants to speak, so I'll let Rads go ahead and speak.
So I don't see any problem with USA giving grants to Nepal, and it's not a loan; it's a grant, so you don't have to repay it. They just want you to follow a certain list of policies. So what they're doing is they're basically telling you to follow like 20 of these policies, and if you follow them, they'll give you a grant to develop your nation. So I think in a poor nation like Nepal, especially where the economy is not really developing much, when we get grants from foreign countries, it's very helpful, because not only is it way more effective than the projects Nepal handles, it's way more transparent to the public too, and the projects are open. So that means the corruption in the middle is completely gone. Unlike in Nepali projects or Nepali developmental projects where there is corruption, and there's like very less transparency in what goes between the funding and the final project. So the thing about distancing ourselves with China is, I think it's actually kind of wrong, because what China will see or what India will see is, oh, their neighbors are being helped much more by other nations, and they are losing their connection. So instead of leaving us even more, they'll try to help us even more, if that like kind of makes sense. But what I believe is MCC is just US's way of saying, if you follow the policies that we follow, then we are ready to help you. And I don't think it harms the sovereignty of Nepal much, because it hasn't changed its policies at all for this project.
Thank you for your opinion, Raj. Anyone else willing to speak? They do not really need to be so specific about the MCC itself, just in case you guys don't know very deeply about MCC. You guys can just talk on the standpoint of a more generalized concern about the country's sovereignty and whatnot. So anyone who wants to speak? Okay, so Asmi followed by Larisha. You guys can speak.
Okay, the reason I don't fully agree to this statement, because I agree with everything Raj has said, right? The only reason I don't fully agree is because I doubt the integrity of our government, right? I don't think they have the capability to be stagnant and to be able to represent our country in a way that it preserves our sovereignty. I don't think they're very complacent. I mean, look at India. Look at our situation with India. We're dominated by Indian politics. If countries like the US and even China come like have that much authority over the policies we create and development projects, imagine how much interference, how much interference we're going to have politically, which is the only reason I disagree. Okay, everything else I don't see a problem. That's it.
Larisha, you can go on.
Okay, so I voted somewhat agree, mostly because I think Nepal is very much dependent on our neighbors. It's dependent on a lot of foreign politics, and it has been in many cases strong handled by a lot of countries, right? But our response to being oppressed can't ever be showing more power, because I think our government has failed in that aspect, right? It continuously tends to take our resources. It continuously tends to be corrupt, right? I honestly believe that our government can't do any of that. However, a good response to controlling hegemony would be introducing other powers to Nepal. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, India is still going to oppress us, right? India's never going to just let us be. But if we do have other nations that we can rely on, I think it would be a better situation to exist in Nepal. Because, like, our question of sovereignty, it started from the Sugoli Treaty when British were allowed to make embassies and they were allowed to intrude in our royal courts, right? It's never ended since then. I don't think Nepalese sovereignty is what we think it is. Even in rallies, there's already Indian infiltration. There's infiltration everywhere. So when you take that into account, a lot of countries having foreign investment in Nepal could mean that we have other people or other nations to rely on rather than just the hegemonies in Nepal.
Thank you so much, Larisha. I believe with that we will now be wrapping up. I want to thank all the viewers who were viewing our stream on YouTube and everyone who voted on our TED Instagram page as well for being involved with us in this event. If you guys want to see more events like this, you guys can let that be known in the chat, or you guys can, if you want to be speaking in future Spectrum events like this, you guys can talk to us and we will let you know about what we can do about it. Yeah, so our viewers, I believe they peaked at around 90 something viewers, and most of the viewers stuck by us because right now we still have around 60 people listening to us. So it is way more than we expected for the first ever event, and I'm sure we'll just continue to grow in the future events that are to follow. So that is all. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we will see you next time.